Elisabeth, if I can start with you, why has this declaration come now, do you think?
Well, Bernard, I think the timing is significant. Now, of course, it's true that the grievances of the South go back decades, and the concept of Yemen as a single country is actually very awkward. Yes, it united, not until 1990, but already within 4 years it was at war. So the grievances go back a long way. But I do think that picking this moment to announce self-administration is significant because all eyes were on the ceasefire that Saudi was trying to broker between the government and the Houthis. And at the same time, of course, the world's attention is on fighting the virus and what devastation that might cause in Yemen. And people are pretty much on holiday because it's the start of Ramadan. And the Riyadh agreement hadn't worked out that was signed between the North and the South. And so this was the moment to pick to actually declare, finally, self-administration.
Elisabeth, could the STC have done this without a nod from the UAE?
That's very unclear at the moment, Bernard. I think what we can say is that, yes, the grievances of the South, currently mainly represented by the STC, are there. They're genuine. They've existed for a long time. But they've been helped along by support from the UAE, who did originally fund the creation of the STC in 2017 and at the same time recruit military forces across the South, which answer essentially, despite the Riyadh agreement, still to the STC. So it's difficult to see how the STC could move without the say-so of the UAE, but of course we can't be sure.
Elisabeth, would the Houthis support what's going on in the south there? Would they be interested to see a more independent-minded southern part of Yemen? Does that help them?
I think what the Houthis will be keen to see is this rift re-emerging in the coalition. It was clear that the Riyadh agreement signed between the Hadi government and the STC in November really just kicked the can down the road. It didn't solve anything. It didn't solve the issue of southern secession, and it put in place a whole load of promises and timelines that haven't been kept. No doubt that this benefits the Houthis because it makes the coalition far less strong in fighting them. Would the Houthis, though, actually want a separate secessionist southern state? That's a lot less clear, because even though that would put them in charge, or at least in control of most of the north, really the resources are in the south. So in the short term, the Houthis are probably quite pleased about this. In the long term, much less clear.
But do you see this eventually ending up with another independent South Yemen?
I think what we do know is that Yemen as one single entity is problematic. But I don't necessarily think that means that Yemen as two entities, North and South, is going to solve all the problems. In fact, when the South did eventually cohere at the end of the 1960s, even then it was not consensual across the governorates that were incorporated into that. So the South is not necessarily a popular concept across the South even. So what I think we might have eventually is Yemen split into further parts, which might become federal regions. But I think you made a very good point, Bernard, in saying that it's not clear that the STC represents even those who do support a separate South inside the South. Surely it's the loudest voice, and I agree with Al-Khadr. There were millions on the streets in support of it. But already today, we've had declarations by the governors of Hadramaut, of Shabwa, of Al-Mahra, southern governorates who've said, no, we're not on board with the Southern Transitional Council. And all right, you could say that those governors were appointed by President Hadi. But it's not at all clear that in those eastern governorates, there's support for the STC or for a breakaway South.
Elisabeth, what do you think Saudi Arabia is going to do now? It doesn't want to see the Houthis strengthened along its southern border.
No, I think Saudi Arabia actually is quite keen to get out of Yemen now, and that's probably why it's offered a unilateral ceasefire. Houthis were on the front foot, actually. So they haven't agreed to the ceasefire, but now we've seen Saudi Arabia extend it for a further month. I think they'll try to pull back. I think both parties, actually, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, are probably pretty war-weary. And with this massive drop in the oil price, it's expensive financially, militarily, in terms of international credibility and reputation. I think they're going to step back.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today.